Today we have panel discussion on bank branch audit. I welcome all the dignitaries of the today's panel discussion. Uh, Central Council member Srinivas Joshi will be the moderator of the today's discussion. CA Vipul Choksi, past chairman WIRC and Central Statutory Auditor of State Bank of India. CA Sanju Maheshwari, past chairman WIRC and past Central Council member and director of State Bank of India. CA Himanshu Vasa, president and business head Kotak Mahindra Bank are the three panelists. I thank you all the four dignitaries and learned speakers for accepting our invitation for sharing their vast experience. All the panelists opted to contribute to the CABF fund as a memento, and we are contributing on their behalf to ICAI. I now request CA Purvi Bagaria, core group member of JB Nagar CPE Study Circle, to introduce for the speakers.
Thank you, ma'am. Today's topic for discussion is panel discussion on issues in bank branch audit. The moderator is Mr. CA Srinivas Joshi. He is a partner of CVK and Associates. He is a member of the ICAI and ICSI and has been into the practice of chartered accountancy for over 40 years now. He was elected member of Central Council of the ICAI for 2 terms, 2013-2016 and 1922. He was the chairman of WIRC of the ICAI for 11-12 and has been a past convener of the Mulund Study Circle. He has also been the chairman of various committees and boards of ICAI like the Financial Reporting Review Board, Professional Development Committee, Corporate Laws and Corporate Governance Committee, convener of the UDIN Director. Currently, he is a member of 29 committees and 3 directorate of Council of the ICAI. He is a speaker at various seminars of these chartered accountants and students at WIRC and its branches on the subjects of auditing, auditing standards, company law, bank audits, internal financial controls, FEMA, frauds, networking and mergers, peer review, career counseling, how to face a CA exam, etc. And he's been doing this for the past 20 years. He is holding the directorship of companies L&T Mutual Fund Trustee Limited, SBI Cards and Payments Limited. He is also a director of XBRL India, ICAI, and Accounting Research Foundation of the ICAI. I welcome CA Srinivas Joshi. Coming to the speakers, our first speaker is CA Vipul Choksi. He is a senior partner of Shah Gupta and Company and a qualified insolvency professional. He was the chairman of WIRC of the ICAI for the year 2002-03. He has been member of various committees of the Council of ICAI from time to time. He is a member of the group for revision of all the editions of the guidance notes on audits of banks from 2009 and 9 to 18. He was the member of the subgroup of ICAI for the revision of LFAR for banks. He's also been the managing council member of the Chamber of Tax Consultants since 7-8. He is a regular faculty at the seminars organized by ICAI and other professional organizations on the subjects related to bank audits, accounting and auditing, and contributes articles on technical subjects in CA Journal and other professional journals. I welcome you, CA Vipul Choksi.
Thank you.
CA Sanjeev Maheshwari. Sanjeev ji, he has been the founder member of JB Nagar CPE Study Circle. He has served as the chairman of WIRC for the year 2005-06. He has been the Central Council member of the for the years 2007 to 16. He has been the chairman of the Accounting Standards Board from 2013 to 16, and he has been instrumental in bringing the Ind AS in India. He has been on the technical committees of ICAI like the AASB, FRRB, Peer Review Board, Ethical Standards, etc. He contributes regularly at the various forums of the ICAI, and he is also a director of the State Bank of India. Welcome, Sanjeev ji.
Thank you.
CA Himanshu Vasa. He is an alumni of the Wharton School, a certified fraud examiner, and a certified control self-assessor, and a commerce graduate from the University of Mumbai. He has a post-qualification experience of more than 29 years. He is presently the president and business head, bank finance for Kotak Mahindra Bank. He was the head of group internal audit for more than 9 years and also the head of internal vigilance for more than 6 years. He has been awarded the Certificate of Recognition of Excellence at the CFO 100 Awards for 5 consecutive years. He has also been a speaker at the National Conference on State of Corporate Fraud Control in India, conducted by the ASSOCHAM and Ministry of Corporate Affairs by the Government of India. He has been a speaker on various platforms like the WIRC and others, including Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. He was a member of the managing committee of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society for more than 15 years. And he is also a member of the various committees of the ICAI, like the Internal Audit Committee, Committee of Members in the Industry of ICAI, the Search Committee of ICAI, and others. I welcome you, CA Himanshu Vastav.
Thank you, Purvi, for introducing all the three panelists and the moderator of the today's session. Members are requested to put the questions in the chat box. First of all, I request CA Himanshu Vasaji to introduce the to explain the background of the bank due to COVID situation.
Thank you, Seema. 2020 has been a year of many uncertainties, and this is primarily due to the pandemic and COVID-19. And the banking sector, amongst all other sectors, has also been impacted. Given this situation, a lot of measures were taken by the government of India, and which has a direct impact on the way the auditors will audit the year ended March 2021. It all started with the government of India coming out with a COVID-19 package where moratorium was granted to all eligible borrowers. Eligible borrowers being those who were not NPAs as on 29th of February 2020. Okay. It is okay if somebody was in default, but he was not declared an NPA. That is important. So anybody who was not an NPA on 29th of February 2020 was eligible to be given a moratorium. As we call this as Moratorium 1. This started from 1st of March 2020 and went on till about 31st of May 2020. Around the last week of May, the government of India then came up with the extension of moratorium, which again commenced from 1st of June 2020 and ended on 31st August 2020. Given this situation, there were a lot of customers of various banks which went through the entire moratorium phase and who were eligible and were granted moratorium. Come first week of September, what we saw were there were various applications filed before the Supreme Court of India, and Supreme Court of India in its wisdom has stayed any customer from being declared an NPA effective 1st of September 2020. And that stay order is still continuing, and as we speak, it is live. So any bank who had a customer who had crossed 90 days from an NPA perspective would not be declared an NPA effective 1st of September 2020. And as we speak and as we go along, assuming that there will not be any further orders from the Supreme Court for the year ended 31st of March 2021, from 1st September, there will be no customers who will be declared as an NPA. Now, this is one side of the story on the NPA. What did banks do to make sure that there was adequate liquidity? Okay, banks ensured that there was adequate cash available, liquidity was maintained. Besides Government of India pumping in liquidity and coming out with various schemes, banks ensured that they were liquid. Most of the banks raised capital. So from that perspective, while it may not impact the branch auditors, it will impact the central auditors, central statutory auditors, and they will go through the rigor of the entire capital raise. The third most important thing that happened was the various restructuring schemes, that the Government of India declared. And as we speak, all applications were meant to be made by 31st of December 2020 and are to be examined, and restructuring has to be completed by 31st March. Again, I'm not sure how much it will impact the branch audits, but at the central level, this will definitely have a major impact on the way the audit is carried out. I think if you cover these three aspects, a lot of ground would have been covered. And it is my understanding that besides this, technology audits will play a very, very important role in the audit of banks, given the fact that what has happened in the last 12 months is something that anybody would have done over the next 3 to 5 years. A very important person overseas made a statement, and this is the reality as we are saying, that typically in a bank, technology was being used as an enabler. As we are going along, we are seeing technology companies taking over the business of banking who have the license to undertake banking. With this, I hand over to Seema to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, CA Himanshu Basa, for sharing the impact of COVID on banking industry. I now request CA Srinivas Joshi, moderator of the today's panel discussion, to carry the meeting.
Good morning to all. To my permanent chairman Sanjeev Maheshwari, who was my chairman in WRC and remained our friend for life thereafter. Vipul ji, who was chairman prior to that, and as our guide in all bank audit seminars and bank audit guidance note that we make in Mumbai over a long period, where all of us are together to get that publication out every year. A quality publication, one of the most qualitative publication of ICAI. Himanshu Basa ji, extremely knowledgeable and important part of this particular, not only this particular discussion forum, but in the banking industry as well, heading a very important private bank. And of course, as it is known to be a very excellent professional in our professional circles. Seema-ji, who is recently become the convener of JB Nagar, all my friends in JB Nagar and all others who are listening to this particular webinar. Friends, if you see the institute, I was a chairman of the PD committee in the immediate past year. And one of the things that we do is have the MEF, multiple empanelment form, data collected, assimilated, sent to RBI for bank audits, and also discuss with RBI on several issues in bank audit. Last year was in a pandemic year, we were facing a great challenge. When I became the chairman of PDC, the first challenge was to retain the bank branch audit itself. Because all the banks wrote to, especially public sector bank, in any case, there is no branch audit in private sector or cooperative banks. Public sector banks, one by one, one after the other, wrote to RBI saying there cannot be any branch audit this year. That is year 2020, because of the pandemic, auditors would never reach branches and it cannot be done. We were worried in the institute as to once it is the branch audit is out of our hands, it will permanently be out of our hands. You can know what happened to that 90% circular, and which is still continuing. So we fought we not only wrote to RBI, not only we consistently wrote, repeatedly wrote in the weeks to RBI on this. We also had meeting with all the central statutory audit firms, about 84 of them last year individually, with president, vice president there, and we convinced them that they should support institute in this particular venture of retaining the bank audit, because it is absolutely necessary to do so. And in April 20, you cannot have a situation where central auditors are told there will be no branch audit and you will be doing the whole bank on your own. So they supported us, and we also told RBI that we will do remote audit from remote locations, allow us to do that, because they also wanted some solution to this, and they gave this solution to us that you can do remote audit. When we went to RBI in this year, again, we requested that pandemic, again, there is a second wave, which came little later, but we said that pandemic is not over and we should be allowed to do online audit or remote audit, which again, they have accepted. So one thing I would like to tell you on behalf of the institute, that this year also, you can request the banks to give you the access to another branch, which is allotted to you from the nearest branch. And all the guidance given by ICI for remote audit is valid this year also. This is number one. If the bank refuses, you can always contact RBI, you can contact central auditor, you can also contact institute, because that is the agreement. They should allow you to do it from another branch, nearer branch. This is one thing I'll like to tell you. We will have webinars like Himanshu sir said on technology, on how to use technology in audit. And this particular webinars which were done last year would be repeated this year as well, with experts telling us how to do remote audit in most effective way. Many of you have done it last year, but I think this is the year in which you'll have to rethink on that in case of need, that you can't go physically to a particular branch allotted to you. That was number one. Number two is about the coverage. Last year, the norms changed about coverage from 20 crore and below 1/5 number of branches and 20 crore and above advances, all the branches, to 90% of the funded and non-funded advances to be covered. This particular change of norm, because they wanted less number of branches to be covered. So they were having the idea that one side banks are saying there should be no audit, institute is saying there should be full audit. So this was a midway. Now, last year, the branch reduction was substantial in most of the banks. But this year, again, when the same norms came, it came with a difference. I hope all of you have noticed that difference in the current year norms versus last year norms. The current year norms say the allocation of branches, the branches which are to be audited under these norms are to be approved by the central auditors. Moment this came in this, we immediately again went to RBI. We had physical meeting with RBI with the immediate past president Atul Gupta ji. I was there as a PD committee chairman. And we said that this is in 90%. We quoted SA 530 on sampling, and we said that this sampling is not right. Every type of loan is a separate segment of business, having risk and rewards being different for the bank. And therefore, we want 90% to be covered in MSME, in agricultural loans, in housing loans, in vehicle loans, etc., and not go only by infra loans or large loans which are available with you in the banks. And therefore, we also again had physical meeting with central auditors through PDC. Also, we connected to them on video wherever possible who could not attend. And we told them not to approve this particular allocation or the number of branches to be covered unless 90% is to be covered in every type of loan. And it is heartening to know that central auditors were able to convince various bank managements to increase the branches in such a way that even MSME, agricultural loans, small loans are also covered to the extent necessary for them to say that it gives true and fair view of the whole banking business as such. And many of the banks have increased the number of branches over last year from 500,000 and even more than that in various banks on the request of the central auditors to cover more in various types of loans. So that was the second development I wanted to brief you. Third is about bank audit guidance note. Our Mumbai group, along with this year with groups from Delhi and South, various cities, we did a guidance note. It has been released yesterday. This guidance note this year has been in 3 parts. one main guidance note. We added 2 more parts to that as separate booklets. The reason was that this year, internal financial control is first time applicable to the banks. It was applicable last year also, it was voluntary. This year it is compulsory to be followed. So we had to have a separate booklet on IFC, internal financial control for banks. That's a technical guide. Another technical guide we issued for long form audit report. This year LFAR has completely changed for central auditors. There's a huge additional responsibility as well as to the branch auditors. Several new questions have come. So we tried to give from the institute another technical guide on long form audit report, a new long form audit report, which will be uploaded by Monday, that is tomorrow. The other 2 IFC technical guide has been uploaded. Bank audit guidance note has been uploaded yesterday, and we hope to upload the new LFAR guidance by tomorrow, maximum day after morning. With this background of what institute is trying to do in case of bank audit, there are 2 more things I like to say. One is about the fees. The last time the fee was revised was in 2013. We went to RBI. We have gone to every 3-year fee should be revised. That is our agreement of the institute with RBI from 2006. 2006 it was revised, 9 it was revised, then 13 it was revised. Thereafter it is not revised. So we, when I was PDC committee chairman, we wrote to RBI that now again, if you revise, it will not be revised for another 3 years minimum. So consider a span of 2013 to 2025 as a band, and you give us 100% increase. If you feel 100% is too high, you may feel so, but if you see the span of 12 years, I think it is not really considering the cost, considering the huge additional responsibilities pressed on central auditors as well as branch auditors, you should give a substantial rise. There is a resistance obviously from banks because of 2 reasons. One is their balance sheet, their profits are under pressure this year because of huge non-performing expected NPAs or expected credit loss, as we say, in the banks, and therefore to increase any cost is an issue. But we argued that this cost is too minuscule for any banks to do it. But friends, the real challenge is not that. The real challenge is the quality of audit. Unless we give every client, bank is a customer, bank is a client. Now, unless I give value addition to any client, it is not possible for me to ask for additional fees. When fees are substantially, they feel that fees are substantially high otherwise also as compared to the value addition they get. They get value addition from internal audits, concurrent audits, revenue audits, stock audits are great contributors to the overall control mechanism. But whether statutory audit is giving the same kind of support to the bank is the question in their mind, and therefore there is a big resistance to increasing fees. I think we need to discuss that in every forum, including this forum, as to how I give more quality in the audit, overall perspective of as auditors, so that my audit is satisfied and he compensates me to a right at the right level. So this is one thing I like to tell you about the fees structure, etc. The last thing about allotment, there seems to be some issues with some firms who are continuing auditors, say their names have been dropped by RBI, 2nd year, in the 3rd year, in the 4th year. There seems to be some firms who were already recommended by ICAI, more than 40,000 firms and proprietors have been recommended. But some of the names have suddenly gone out of that list from RBI. We'll take it up tomorrow because we knew it only Friday evening, Saturday and today. And therefore we'll take it up tomorrow whether there is a technical error in sending the data to the banks. And this is a very critical thing for some of the firms who may be listening here, that their names may or may not be in the list which has gone to bank. Maybe there are some issues and we'll try to solve the issues at institute level. This was the general thing I wanted to say here from this platform. And because I think as a Central Council member, I need to abreast you of the things that what institute does or what institute does in a big way. Of course, in addition, Western WIRC is also having its own booklet, whole series of seminars, webinars in this pandemic situation also, and Western WIRC is doing a humongous job to update all of us on many subjects, including bank audit. With that background, I will come to some of the key issues in this particular bank audit this year. I hope that this particular question answer sessions, we will concentrate more on general issues and then issues specific to branches. rather than issues for central auditors. Central auditors firms are very large. They would take up their issues as the time comes, and they are capable of handling those issues because they have huge capabilities, internal capabilities to handle issues or discuss issues with management. I think we'll concentrate more on general things as well as the specific for the branches, general audit. So I'll come to Sanjeev Maheshwari, sir, and request him to speak either on the what he feels about how we maintain the quality of audit. First, he can speak on again, like Himanshu sir, on the current situation in banking and overall banking scenario. And also, if we can tell us about the quality, maintenance of quality of audit in PSBs, especially what is his expectation from auditors. Thank you, friends. Over to Sanjeev Maheshwari.
Thanks, Srinivas. Thank you very much. I believe Himanshu and Srinivas both have laid an excellent backdrop and background of how the year has unfolded, what are the expectations of the stakeholders, and where exactly our profession is with respect to this particular activity. At the outset, let me first congratulate all the participants here, because the fact that most of the participants who have joined in for this particular course are most likely the people who would have already got appointed as branch auditors or are probably continuing auditors. And in the economic scenario, which Srinivas just mentioned, the overall reduction in the number of branches, the number of auditors, I think it's a good thing that we need to ensure as a profession that we need to add value to the entire exercise. Friends, I think also this time there are some changes that I see is that most of the time earlier we would have 3 branches coming in, but I think this time to have a wider spread, probably there will be many auditors who would be having only 2 branches. Fees is of course a matter of which is being discussed with Reserve Bank of India and ICI, and I hope that the profession stands to benefit by that. On the changes, of course, Himanshu has actually talked about that what were the key things, key developments which have happened as far as the major thrust that we have as far as the financials are concerned, be it in terms of the advances that most of the focus is, and with the fact of the moratorium and the NPA accounts, India accounts not being declared NPA, I think we would need to really be completely familiar with the RBI circulars and then the provisioning norms, so we are able to ensure that we comply with all the requirements. For I think a good number of auditors here would be those who are continuing auditors, and some of them would be new auditors or those who are coming off out of the cooling period. So for those who are continuing auditors, probably a lot of that we discuss here is known to them. But from the perspective of those who are doing it for the first time, I think what is important is that your preparation for the bank branch audit should be well in advance, and it should be very thorough. And from that perspective, I think it is very important that you must be familiar, you must spend time, invest time on reading the RBI circulars, number 1. 2 is in the guidance note, which is being issued by the institute every year. And 3rd is, of course, that the internal instructions which come from the branch, the central statutory auditors to the branch auditors, as well as the instructions that go to the branches. A combined reading of all this will make you familiar with all the latest expectations of the banks. The fact that the last year has made us grow exponentially as far as technology is concerned, or use of technology as far as our audits are concerned, has been a real learning experience for all professionals. And this is what would be required, because here, if you look at this particular year also, especially for the audit, or especially for the members here in this area, the audits would be of Bombay, Maharashtra, and where we have this COVID issues resurfacing. I think it will be important that we are able to use the technology most appropriately. The last year's experience was really very heartening to see that all the banks going out of the way to help the auditors to ensure that they had access and they had remote access. And it was a first time for banks also, and it was very difficult for them. But keeping in mind the need of completing the audit in time, and at the same time having the auditors a complete sense of assurance that the information flow to them was right and they got a comfort of signing of the financial statement. I think it was an excellent combined efforts of the auditors as well as the banks. And I'm sure that the same kind of spirit will continue from the professional side also in this particular year also. So I think in this particular year, I think apart from whatever we have been doing, I think Srinivas Joshi ji has mentioned rightly, LFAR and I think the internal financial control over financial reporting. I think that is very important because for even the existing auditors, for the continuing auditors, the internal financial control on for financial reporting will be a new thing at the bank. And last year, as Joshi ji mentioned, that though it was voluntarily, but most of the banks had not opted for that because the RBI circular had come in pretty late, and the auditors and the banks needed time to prepare for this. And on the basis of the representations made by the institute and the profession and the banks as well, it was deferred to be done mandatorily by 1 year. And this year now, all the banks have prepared themselves adequately. And for the professionals, this will be a new dimension of examining the process flow, the risk control matrix, the control testing documents to ensure that the financial controls over financial reporting are rightly applicable or rightly being utilized at the branch level as well. So I would recommend to all the participants here that please allocate specific time for the verification process for this particular area. Srinivas, I think at this point of time, I would leave it at a broader aspect, but I would suggest that the members would need to be very careful in terms of making adequate safeguards as far as the advances, the provisioning norms are concerned, and particularly this year because of the advances the government GECL loan has come across in huge volumes, maybe one would need to be more careful in terms of the overall security pattern, the valuation, and the papers around that, and also in terms of a lot of restructuring has happened. So I think these are the two elements which one should be considering more specifically in this particular year end as far as the branch audits are concerned. Back to you, Srinivas.
Thank you, Sanjeev ji, for as usual your detailed analysis of the things as a director of the largest public sector bank and the systemically important bank in this country. This was a apt guidance to us. Friends, I think let us talk on some of the issues in general first as to how as a chartered accountant I should do the work. First, I'll request before that our friend Vipul ji, if he wants to say some general guidelines he wants to give to all of us on bank audit or talk about current situation on bank audit or anything he has to say as an initial guidance, then we will go to specific questions. Over to Vipul ji.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you, Seema-ji, for having invited me to be part of this panel. It's always a pleasure to be the part of JB Nagar Study Circle, one of the most vibrant study circle who has given so many leaders to the profession, including Sanjeev and the current chairman of WRC, Mr. Manish Kadia. And thank you, Purvi, for the wonderful introduction. I think Himanshu, Sanjeev and Srinivas ji have covered all the key points which are relevant for bank audit. Himanshu didn't touch upon internal financial control for the simple reason that, in the private sector bank, Kotak Bank, to which he belongs, it is mandatory for many years now. So, for him, it was not relevant, but the public sector bank, internal financial control is one of the key things, which has come in this year. And Sanjeev ji rightly, discussed about the preparedness about internal financial control, but I think all the banks are thinking that internal financial control verification may not be given to all the branch auditors. They have been deliberating whether it should be given to all the branch auditors or it should be given only to the large branches of, the samples which they would select in consultation with the central auditor, and only those branches should be covered. So that is one area, but nonetheless, I think some of the key area which Sanjeev ji discussed, I would like to, touch upon those. One is value addition, which is very important. Thorough and preparation before, the commencement audit, very relevant, because the biggest challenge we as auditor, which we face is, we don't have enough time to complete our audit. And we are in like end of March, today is 21st. So you still have 10 days before, the year end. So if your appointment letter is received, and if the branch management permits, I think you should start the audit, because there are two things, which are very important this year. One is internal financial control, if it is allocated to the branch which you are auditing, and the revised LFAR. Revised LFAR is very, very voluminous with lot of responsibility, which are given to the auditors. I don't know how many of you have gone through the revised LFAR, but you need to now, attach the samples which you have selected for audit of advances. So I think that is very important. So whatever samples you decide on the basis of criteria given in LFAR, you will have to attach those samples as part of a LFAR. And there are so many, things which I would not like to deal with, but I'm sure you are going to have a separate session on LFAR, but that is one key area. Another thing which Himanshu touched upon is Supreme Court decision in case of Gajendra Sharma. Now there is an interim order of 3rd September, as per which all the banks need not classify the accounts as of 1st September 2020. So the new accounts will not be classified as NPA. Now there are some technical issues which are floating around. One is the validity of interim order. The legal experts say that the validity of interim order is only for 6 months. So if it was dated 3rd September, then it is technically valid only till 3rd March 2021. Maybe Sanjeev ji can throw some light on that. So validity of the order, if the order is not valid, whether bank would be required to make provision or classify the accounts as NPA. That is one area where we need some clarification. But I'm sure all the banks, is their concern, they would be, seeking legal view on this particular aspect. Second is, you as auditor, what is your responsibility? If an account which is NPA as per prudential norm, what is your obligation as auditor? Whether you would be required to, make a mention of that in your report, whether you would be required to qualify your report, or how would you deal with that? Now, as we are aware, all the banks, even though they are not classifying the accounts as NPA, they have been making provision on account as if the account would have become NPA, and the interest which is not realized, that is also being reversed by them. So you as auditor, in that sense are, safe that even though the bank is not classifying account as NPA, they are making provision. And the reason, why banks are not classifying as NPA, because Supreme Court is the apex court. And if you don't classify the, if you classify the account as NPA, it would be contempt of court. And that is the reason I think all the banks have taken that view. And I think we as auditor, if the provision is made, if unrealized interest is reversed, it should be fine. And all the banks, they are making disclosure, in a very clear-cut manner that this is, the provision which is made in respect of these accounts, which otherwise would have become NPA, but because of Supreme Court decision. So this disclosure is enough. So in my view, if this disclosure is made, and if you are required to certify this, I think you may certify this and make a mention of that in your report without qualifying or without giving emphasis of matter. This is, of course, my personal view. Now, other issue, some of the key issues which may be relevant for this year are the COVID loans. If you recall, in the month of April, May, RBI came out with, directives that because of COVID, all the borrowers, they were having liquidity problems. So RBI said that 10% of the limit could be given as COVID loan, with a condition that that COVID loan should be repaid by 31st March 2021. So you as auditor, if and I'm sure the branch which you audit, there would be cases where COVID loan is given. So if COVID loan is given, whether the loan is repaid by 31st March, if not repaid, what would be the treatment? The treatment will not be, it will be a standard because of the Supreme Court decision. So you need not classify the NPA. But if COVID loan there is no repayment by 31st March, you can make a mention of that. Another point is, Himanshu made a mention of the moratorium circulars, the circular of 23rd May 2020, where if the interest during moratorium is not realized, the bank can convert that interest into FITL, that is funded interest term loan. So that also FITL also was required to be repaid by 31st March. So if that is not paid by 31st March, what would happen, and what is interest on FITL, how the bank has treated? So these are some of the areas you can, and of course the central auditor of the respective bank would give you guidance on that. Then ex gratia payment, that is ex gratia payment is in respect of borrowers who are having facility of less than 2 crore or exposure of less than 2 crore. They are not supposed to pay the compounded interest. And accordingly, the bank, the government of India has made good that loss to all the banks by, repaying to all the banks the compound interest which they have not recovered from the borrower. So you as auditor will not be required to do detailed checking, but you have to just ensure that that recovery is made from government of India. It will be parked in a separate suspense account, and that you may examine. Restructuring of advances again is by a white circular dated 6th August. There is a detailed circular where a lot of guidance is given, and bank is required to make provision in respect of those restructured advances. So 10% of provision is required to be made. So whether bank has made provision in respect of that. Another important circular is of 14 September 2020 is in respect of automation by the branches. The Reserve Bank of India has given a circular wherein it has very clearly said that there should not be any manual intervention as far as classification of NPA is concerned. But the deadline for that is 30th June 2021. So you as auditor can just make an inquiry whether bank is making any progress in this area. So these were some of the key issues which I thought are relevant for the audit of March 21. And as we move forward, whatever questions come, we'll answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vipul ji. As usual, very studied presentation. Friends, about internal financial control, I like to add that if you see guiding principles of LFAR, current LFAR, it says that overall objective of the branch audit should be to have transaction testing and provide inputs to central auditors on various matters. So that is one thing. And about IFC in the internal financial control technical guide, we have stated that's the scope of auditors, branch auditor would be limited in that. As Vipulji mentioned, first of all, if you see the IFC as an overall concept, this is not new to us. In any case, private sector, whenever we are doing large audits, in any case, listed company audits, IFC was already there for a long time. But here, if you see what is the, in case of bank branches, when it is made applicable, first is design of a control. So design of a control will be tested at the central office level, by central auditors. Second part is that, so designing in any case, branch auditors are not concerned. It is the second part is whether they are operating effectively. Now, the guidance that is given in this technical guide about IFC is that as far as the branches are concerned, first, as Vipulji mentioned, that the central auditors should decide where these need to be tested, which branches they need to be tested, and then they select the branches. So your branch may not be in the IFC testing at all, especially smaller branches. So that is where there is a guidance given in the technical guide how to select branches for such kind of testing. But if you see the guidance note, it says that the SBAs are required to test only operative effectiveness at branch level based on the sample size as determined by central auditors. So rightly said by Vipulji that central auditors will guide what sample they want you to have the transaction testing done. to see the operative effectiveness of various controls. So I don't think we should be too much of worried on IFC, at least at branch level, even though it's a very, very huge responsibility for specifically certifying all internal financial control relating to financial statements by the central auditors. So with this, let us go to some of the other parts of it.
May I make a comment on IFC?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are the best person, sir, on IFC to say something.
No. So, okay. I think while all has been spoken, I think one important thing that any branch auditor will need to be careful about is that if your branch has been selected for doing IFC testing, please ask the central statutory auditors to give you the risk and control matrix, without which it will not be possible for you to undertake the branch IFC audit. Because otherwise, if there are, say, 500 branches chosen, without a checklist coming, everybody will follow their own checklist, and the entire testing will go for a toss. Everyone will follow what they want to follow. And hence, it is absolutely critical that you get the risk and control matrix to undertake the IFC audit if your branch has been selected. Over to you, Srinivas.
Sir, you are absolutely right. When we had the all the physical virtual webinar and also this virtual seminar with the central auditors recently, a couple of last month in Gurgaon, some of them suggested that this kind of risk and control metrics or checklist should be given by ICAI. We thought there in PDC and also in banking committee and other committee, WSB and all, but we were of the opinion that can it be that straitjacket for all the banks? Do you feel, because you are the right person to say, guide the institute, whether such risk and control metrics or checklist can be standardized? Because many of the central auditors, especially sitting there, thought that it's an onerous task on them in the given time to do so. But number one. Number two, I'm aware that especially public sector banks have now appointed several consultants in IFC, but they have very little time to do this testing and certify that everything is right. For the management to again tell the auditor, yes, we have tested the controls, and the basic thing is they should test the control first, as you must be doing in private banks, and certify to auditor that this is the result of the test, these are the gaps that were found, and this is how we corrected them. I don't know in PSB when such a consultant is appointed in February, whether there is really a time for that consultant to do all that for the bank this year, and again for banks to certify to central auditors. So what is your take on this risk and control metrics and checklists being standardized, or you feel that it should be per bank wise, and accordingly you guide the institute in this? Because this will affect, as you said, the branch auditors, because finally they would be the one who would get this.
So it is my humble view, and these are my personal views, that ICAI cannot step into the shoes of the bank to develop a checklist. Let us understand the concept of risk and control matrix and the certification that you need to do. The certification that one needs to do is internal controls over financial reporting. Yeah, that is the full form of ICFR. I'm repeating, internal controls over financial reporting. Now, how does one expect the institute to have any wherewithal to say that these are the controls that each bank has got for itself? Yeah. So I think my suggestions are twofold. A, the responsibility for developing checklist primarily is with the respective banks, and institute cannot step into that. It will be the biggest mistake that the institute will make if it steps into those shoes. Number one. Number two, do we have common processes and common controls across the banking industry? The answer is no. Every bank will use its own system. Every bank will have its own processes, and therefore the RCMs have to be specific to specific banks. Third, before even the auditors can get into auditing ICFR, it is the responsibility of the banks to have their own testing done. Audit is the second line of defense or the third line of defense, not the first line of defense. If you see the original guidance on ICFR of the institute, it says internal auditors have, or the auditors have, are the third line of defense. The first line of defense are the people who at the business levels who actually are ensuring that there is operating effectiveness of controls. The second line of defense is the audit committee or the risk teams within the organization. And actually it is the second line of control is the risk team. The third line of control is internal audit. And if at all, the fourth line of control is statutory auditors. So statutory auditors cannot step in there and just start making observations without the bank having tested its own control. And from what I hear you, I hear that large banks are not ready with their own ICFR and they have appointed consultants only in February. I think the institute should use its might, take this up with RBI and tell them that auditors cannot report on this because the banks themselves are not ready. I don't think the auditors can prepare the RCMs. Yes, they can get a separate assignment and that is for preparing RCMs, but it cannot be a part of the statutory audit engagement or the scope of work of a statutory audit. These are my submissions and these are my personal views. Having understood the concept of ICFR and the concept of risk and control matrix.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Bole sir.
Srinivasji, I totally agree with, I think, Himanshu. He has very well articulated all the points. RCM, cannot be same for all the banks, even though the way they operate is more or less same, but the processes may not be the same. So I think it cannot be tailor-made by the institute. And second is about the preparedness of the bank. If banks are not prepared, and if the RBI wants it to be, mandatory for this year to be reported, then the auditors may have to give a disclaimer or qualified opinion. I think they may not have any option. But I don't know. The bank should be able to prepare the RCM anyway. But as Himanshu rightly said, then the institute may represent to RBI to defer it by one more year, or auditors otherwise may have to take a view on that.
Srinivas, just to add on.
Yes.
Srinivas?
Yes.
I think we are in a situation where if we are discussing this issue, we are discussing something that where we were in March 20 also, because this circular for ICFR had actually come up in the month of February or March 2020. And that is, as we discussed earlier, that representation was made, and because of which only the entire thing was deferred to be made mandatory by 1 year. Now, it is in our experience, my experience is, and I think people will bear with me, is that the audit committee and the bank was sensitive to this particular issue, and consultants were appointed well in advance to ensure, and the audit committee would continuously monitor the entire activity over the whole year to ensure that the consultant is in place or the systems are in place and the statutory auditors are on board. At least all the desired steps which were required, because once RBI has given you a year's time, efforts had to be made from the bank's perspective. But I do understand that as I think you mentioned, and we are aware that some of the banks have started off very late as somewhere in January or February 2021. And probably that is where there would be they would be struggling far more than some of the banks who would have prepared well in time. But just to come back to my final point on this is that it would be more appropriate for the banks to go to the Reserve Bank of India rather than the chartered accountants or the professional body going and saying that we are not geared up. Because it was the banks who were required to gear up in the year 2021 to ensure that they were adequately prepared. Just like the case, what happens is that when we go to regulators every point of time for seeking extensions in GST and income tax, the government says that, why is the industry not coming across? Why is it only the CA body which is coming across? Similarly, I think on this matter also, it should be the banks. If they are not prepared, they would need to make a representation Reserve Bank of India rather than the ICAI. That's my humble opinion.
I second Sanjeev's comment that, it should be the banks who should be going to RBI. Otherwise, as auditors, you may have to consider, disclaimer or qualification.
Sir, I have some view on this from ICI. Sir, if now the same auditor, suppose you have a continuing auditor in your bank and so many years they were supposed to test controls. It is nothing new for them and see, everything is now computerized. In CBS environment, if I don't test controls and without that I'm signing something, it will be very difficult for me to say that I don't know what's happening in the computer. Now coming to those kind of controls to be tested, whether they are through software or the manual or combination of manual software controls, etc. It is very difficult to, sir, this year to have a disclaimer given or a qualification done, especially for continuing auditors, to say that no, we don't know what's happening in the bank. I agree with you that in every case, institute should not go. I would have a midway through institute recommendation. I recommend to institute that to RBI should ask all banks about their readiness when they appointed consultant. What is the result of the testing being done by those consultants on behalf of the bank? And if RBI is convinced that such a certificate by management can be given to auditors about testing, the deficiencies in testing, etc., then only they should be asked to certify. But technically, I have an issue, sir, that now saying, suppose in a private bank after so many years, suppose I'm supposed to certify specifically and I say, no, there are gaps and I can't certify. Still, I'm saying it gives true and fair view. When the financial controls are not tested for financial statements, it will be an issue. I'm closing it here because several people who are listening to this are more focused on branch audit. So we will stop this discussion here, but I can tell you there is an issue with the auditors also in this regard to qualify. Now, friends, I know you are all interested in various problems in the branch audits. One, of course, a new thing that has come up in is long form audit report. First, I'll request Vipulji to guide us on what is something new in this LFAR. I can, of course, tell you something what has come up new. First of all, it has come up new is central auditors have been given a lot of huge new responsibilities, but I'll not request Vipulji to talk on that again. Let us, for the next 1 hour, concentrate on branches. And what is there for branches? He has already mentioned that there is a matrix which has come up, for example, in case of advances, and the percentage of your checking as compared to the total advances need to be given. It's a new requirement, and which will require auditors to do a lot of additional work in this regard. And because then now you are under lens to say how much percentage you covered in the particular, and you are also giving an account. When you are giving account number, name and all, means if there is a fraud in that account or any major irregularities found in that account, you can be also questioned in addition to concurrent auditor and the branch management. You can also be questioned what you have looked into that. He has very well said that in his initial speech that this is a new requirement and is going to hurt. But as Sanjeevji said that they may allot less number of branches this year, because in any case there are less number of branches available for audit, and therefore if they allot less branches, probably this can be done more rigorously at the branch level. But Vipulji, do you feel that there are major challenges to branch auditors in new LFAR, which they should be more aware and they should prepare themselves for in generality? Otherwise, we'll go to specific questions in LFAR thereafter.
Yeah, there are, Srinivasji, challenges for the simple reason that you have to document the samples which you have selected, which is, one thing that whatever advances you are verifying, you have to document it. It will be forming part of your LFAR. So that is one challenge. And the revised criteria is 10% or 10% of 10 crore or 10% of fund and non-fund based facility, whichever is lower. So, accordingly, you will have to verify all the accounts which fall in this limit. Then, some of the other things are cash verification. You have to verify, only cash balance. Now you have to verify ATM balance also. Money and call and short notice, there is some changes, but I don't know why the changes has been made. It may not be relevant for branch audit, but still I think that has been added, but that may not be relevant, strictly speaking. Then advances, many things have been added. The quick mortality, you have to mention. Quick mortality are the cases where an advance becomes NPA in a period of 1 year. Then interest rate correctly fed. I think this is another challenge, where auditor have to, give an assurance that the interest rate has been correctly fed. So earlier there was no such requirement. So here on sample basis, auditors have to, verify that they have been correctly fed. Now, again, from bank to bank, the system changes. The main interest rate is fed with the data center, and only the spread which the bank recovers from the borrower, that is added at the branch level. But nonetheless, maker checker, and it will be forming part of your IFC testing also, if at all it is coming to the branch. Then frequent cases of renewal rollover, again added responsibility. If there is an evergreening, then it has to be specifically seen by the auditors. Then loan to company for buyback of shares, specific requirement of reporting. Then appraisal shortcoming, you have to specifically mention. Now earlier, if you see in the LFAR, there was no such requirement of mentioning whether the appraisal system is okay, and you have to just give a general comment. But you have to specifically. Then renewal review, which were pending for more than 3 months, 6 months, that age-wise analysis you have to give. Now, very important, is DP properly computed? Now, drawing power is something, which is, a very debatable point. How a drawing power has to be calculated, it differs from bank to bank. And some banks have a different policy of determining drawing power. So here there is a responsibility cast on the auditors that whether DP is properly computed. Now, that is something which is onerous, I would say. Then stock audit required but not conducted. So you have to seek the information from the branch as to which are the stock audit which are required to be done as per a procedure, which are not conducted. Then what are the observation in short stock audit which have been reported by the stock auditor, but no action has been taken by the branch management. So these are something which are I would say quite time-consuming processes, and the auditor may find the time given to them is not adequate. The deterioration in value of security is something which is added. Then red flag account, in fraud, red flag account was something which was not there, which has been added now in the branch. Then comment on adverse features significant on top 5 standard accounts. This is very important because as a central auditor, the central auditor is required to report on top 50 accounts of the bank. So they would, cull out from the report of the branch auditors. So all the branch auditors have to give, adverse features of top 5 accounts which they have to identify on the basis of their sampling. Then SMA 012 is something which was not there earlier, that has been added. Then accounts which have been downgraded, upgraded, restructuring of accounts, resolution of stress asset, upgradation of NPA, accounts where IBC is mandated but not initiated, credit guarantee claim rejected, valuation report on NPA. Lot many. So advances is something where a lot of things have been added, and I personally feel that the documentation of the auditors will have to be very, very strong. They will have to demonstrate that whatever they are reporting in the LFAR has been actually done by them. And the time which is given by the bank management to the branch auditor is, you do it by 12th of April or 15th of April. So I'm afraid the time may not be adequate to the auditors. So this is my, as far as LFR is concerned, I run through very fast because there are a lot of issues. I
know, sir. Now let us go to some of the specific things that the listeners here would like to know, because there are new things in LFAR. And of course, as central auditors, you are aware of it. What is we have been asked to give a comment on due diligence report submitted to banks by various borrowers. What is this due diligence report, and who submits, and who is supposed to submit? And because if you see the guidance given on LFAR also does not say who is supposed to submit and who is supposed to give it to the bank at which level of advance, and what auditor is supposed to look into it for commenting in LFR? If you want to answer this. Otherwise, Sanjeev.
So honestly, due diligence, I too am not very clear. I would look at the guidance from the institute. I believe guidance not on new LFR is coming. So
It tells you what is the due diligence report. It tells you what is the due diligence report. That is a report which is a very comprehensive report on the borrower. All his loans, all his directors' information, their disqualifications, and so many things are in that. I was saying that if you say it is received or not is a different thing, but to act on that.
But see, basically, I would put it this way. So, as per the current practice of all the banks, when a new loan is given, there is no practice of obtaining due diligence report. Due diligence report is something when there is a merger happening or something where transaction is happening and the party who is doing transaction wants a comfort, and that's why due diligence is done. So due diligence to a new borrower is something which is unheard of unless there is a very high value transaction. So I would personally feel that due diligence report is something which has to be done by not by the bank but by a third party. So whether the bank has in light of the new LFR, whether the bank has adopted their change their loan granting system of appointing a person who would do due diligence before sanctioning a loan, I think that is where the things would stand. And in light of that, the auditor may have to mention that there is no due diligence report available, rather than breaking his head.
Yeah, here the question is only whether it is obtained and is on record. But I thought that when the auditor has seen that it is obtained,
but
there must be some responsibility.
Srinivaji, the point is when the bank does not have a system of obtaining due diligence report,
we can say
loans, how would the auditor?
Yeah. So there we can always say. Sir, the question is, does the branch
we may just quickly understand from Himanshu whether in the private bank or in Kotak Bank whether they have system.
I'll Vipulji, before Himanshu sir you answer, I'll read the question. Does the branch have on its record a due diligence report in the form and manner required by Reserve Bank of India in respect of advances under consortium and multiple banking arrangements? Give the list of accounts where such certificate or report is not obtained or not available on record. In case the branch is not lead bank, copy of certificate or report should be obtained from the lead bank for review and record. This is the question. Now, if this is so, maybe in consortium banking, you may be doing it. But my point was just to state it is there because it is for review and record. So whether it is reviewed by the bank or not, also probably, in my opinion, will have to be stated by the auditor that this is not reviewed. It is just received and filed. Because the lead banker in a consortium loan is taking all the actions, or there is a discussion in the consortium meetings on that. So what is your take on this due diligence report, and what is auditor's responsibility in LFR that even a private bank auditor will do? Himanshu sir.
I think the requirement for due diligence is, in my view, applicable more from a consortium banking perspective and not from a single bank or a multiple lending perspective. Yes, when there is a large consortium that is there, where loans and advances are given and every bank will agree on a particular amount, I think the lead bank will do a lot of work around granting the advances at a consortium level. And hence this ownership will be at the consortium level. Now, at least I am not aware of, or I have not seen any format prescribed by RBI. That may be probably because we are not as big as a State Bank of India, where you can write a single check of 5,000 crore rupees to any large borrower. But I think this is more from it is more so from a consortium banking perspective.
That's right.
Otherwise, the way I would look at it is, see, due diligence is a term that we as accountants are used to understanding it, as Vipulji said, in case of a merger acquisition or a part sale or for a specific transaction. Now, that may not be the definition as required by RBI. Basically, what I understand as a due diligence is, have you done enough work to understand your customer? And it is more from your know your customer perspective. And how, as a bank, have you mitigated your risk before you have decided to lend to a borrower? So it may be equivalent to a credit appraisal note that somebody would have prepared, which will have a lot of details about the company in terms of historical background, industry in which they are, competition, financials of last couple of years, background of the directors, the dean of the directors, has somebody gone and verified whether they are disqualified, etc., etc. Yeah. So a lot of these things matter.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you for explaining. There are some other questions in LFR, which are not that the auditors don't know, but what is the significance we want to know when we are answering. One question is on interchangeability of funded advance and non-funded advance. This is a common feature in many of the advance sanction letter. But the question is, when that interchangeability is used by the branch, at the time when there is a devolvement of LC or BG, to cover that devolvement, they have used this interchangeability, created additional funding for the branches or for the borrower, and then settled that the devolvement. That is the question. But can any one of you would volunteer to say what is this interchangeability in funded, non-funded? Why it is at all given to a borrower by the bank? And how it is prone to misuse than the use. First, we can say what is the use of such kind of facility to the borrower, so that we understand the mechanism. And second part is how it can be misused. So auditors can be more vigilant on this front, since there is a separate question in LFR on this. Any one of you? Vipulji or Sanjeevji or Maushuji on the interchangeability, funded with non-funded.
See, Srinivasji, interchangeability of non-fund based and fund based facility is something which is common in banking industry, and it is many a times, depending on the nature of the business of the borrower. Sometimes there may be such the business may be such that he may need more of a non-fund based facility. But it would be within the overall sanction limit. Say if a borrower is sanctioned a limit of 500 crores with a non-fund based limit of 250 crores and 250 crores of fund based limit, then overall facility would remain to be 500 crores. So when there is a devolvement, then is interchangeability happens. That is something which I am not able to comprehend, because even if there is a devolvement, if fund-based facility is not used, then his total withdrawal or outstanding remains within the sanction limit. So how would this actually operate? Honestly, I am not able to figure out. If Sanjeevji or Himanshu can just clarify more on that.
Sir, the question is, this interchangeability has been triggered in a sense. The branch is allowing the non-funded to become funded after the devolvement. So that means it was necessary for the branch to do so. The borrower may have already up to the limit in funded. So to accommodate him, they are converting a non-funded to funded. I have seen this in my own bank audits, but in any case, other two, the panelists.
So what is the question then?
Question is that this interchangeability, whether it is used, they are not asking you to comment beyond that, saying if it is used after the devolvement, means that facility of interchangeability is actually used for the benefit of the borrower, or probably to make it non-NPA, because this question has come under NPA part of the advances, the non-performing assets and related. So I think the RBI is on the move that on asking a question that this has been misused, in short, indirectly.
Yeah. So basically, I would say that, then I've understood the point. Then it's a case of, evergreening, where the borrower is being accommodated, and maybe the red flag account where the master circular of fraud, where there are 42 conditions specified, maybe this may be falling in one of that category, and then the auditor may have to simply report, I would say.
Yeah, because I have also found other than this interchangeability, one of the banks substantially reduced margins. See, margins on BG and LC was 25% in physical terms. In a sense, the FDs were kept. they suddenly reduce, the board reduce in a smaller bank, reduce the margin to 5%, release 20% of the fixed deposit, credited it to the account, and said all outstanding has been recovered in interest and principal. So such kind of things, I think auditors should be aware of the last minute changes done by the management to cover up NPA. But of course, other two I would like to speak on the interchangeability. First, I think Sanjeev, do you feel in banking system this interchangeability is being really misused, or it is necessary for the banking system to have such a thing given to the borrower, facility given to the borrower?
So, Srinivas, I think just a couple of points in terms of background. My personal understanding is that over the last few years, I think there has been a sea change in the approach of the bankers also, especially after the asset quality report AQR had come in by the Reserve Bank of India. I think thereafter, my sense is that today banks are wanting to be more prudent, that provide when in doubt, rather than what we used to see earlier, that there was be always an effort to try and actually defer treating an account as an NPA. So I think that's one fundamental change that I have seen in terms of approach, to be more prudent and have a more acceptable approach, and which gives better comfort to the auditors also. Two is that I think this concept of evergreening, wherever it is, if the account, because I think this is all we need to read together, the early warning signals, the data analytics that is now being carried out by the banks in terms of the second line of defense, which Himanshu referred to, is in terms of the risk element. These all are linked with each other. And if an auditor gets a sense that something is being done with the objective of evergreening, possibly, or this is an early signal which is there, then the LFR is the right place where you need to report of the kind of challenges one would expect in this account. Because our IRAC norms are more clear in terms of more quantitative in terms of treating an account as an NPA, I think all the accounts which show an inherent weaknesses or challenges in those accounts, and if an auditor feels that this is an indicator of an evergreening, I think it needs to be captured appropriately. So I wouldn't really I would really need to look at the entire backdrop of an account before you actually determine that whether these margins which were reduced. So if it is a case where you would find that the credit ratings have improved, then I wouldn't say that this is evergreening. So I think all the circumstantial evidence also needs to be examined before we come to a conclusion that, because of the mere fact that the non-funded has become funded or margins have reduced, that the account has an inherent weakness. I think all that needs to be studied together, and then you need to conclude.
So you are saying case-to-case basis auditor also should look into these matters rather than having a common basis. Yeah, Himanshu sir, any comment on this interchangeability?
See, from a practical perspective, if one looks at it, there cannot be one sweeping rule for every advance. Okay, that's the principle that any bank will follow. Facts and circumstances of each case will determine what the bank is doing. Take the example that you said, 25% margin reduced to 5%, and the 20% used to pay up the principal and interest to save the account from becoming an NPA. Now, if this is something that has happened practically towards the cutoff date, whether it's the quarter of a year end, I think there is a cause of concern. And if one looks at the master circular, and I will just draw the attention to a specific paragraph where it says that if there are certain events that have triggered during the, at the balance sheet date, one must satisfy the statutory auditors, and it's not something new. I would draw your attention to paragraph 4.2.6 of the master circular on prudential norm, that's the IRAC norms. And I'll just read out, it's a small paragraph. The asset classification of borrower accounts where a solitary or a few credits are recorded before the balance sheet date should be handled with care and without scope of subjectivity. Where the accounts indicates inherent weakness on the basis of data available, the account should be deemed as an NPA. In other genuine cases, the bank must furnish satisfactory evidence to the statutory auditors, inspecting officers, about the manner of regularization of the account to eliminate doubts on their performing status. Now, let's take two examples in this situation, considering this paragraph. Yeah? Suppose a borrower, say borrower A, has a 1,000 crore limit, 750 and 250 or 250 and 750, whichever way you want to take. Assuming the entire fund-based limit has been drawn down and non-fund-based is partially drawn down. Okay. Now, there is a particular bill for whatever technical reasons has devolved at the cutoff date. And that moves from devolved status to a loan status because all devolved bills will move to a fund-based limit. Now, fund-based has already been fully utilized. Now, the moment, and suppose you have 90 days to fulfill that. Now, at the cutoff date, you may say that the account is already overdue, or it is just about remaining for the interest to be debited to make it overdue. Now, because of this technical reason, one can say the account was overdue, and one can take a position that it was an NPA. But assume for a moment that this was a pure technical reason and the underlying entity, and for the sake of this argument, I'm only saying it was one entity of the Tata Group. Will you make it as an NPA? It is fully backed by guarantees of the parent company, say Tata Sons. And these are all hypothetical examples. So pardon the names, but the names I am taking just to draw home the point. Versus saying a company which has rating has gone down to D or is already in financial difficulty. Now, in one case, you will use the technicality and say it is not an NPA and satisfy yourself, versus another situation where you will say that this company is already in financial difficulty and whatever has been done or not done to protect a account from becoming an NPA. Right? And then look at it before you sign the accounts or for a reasonable period after that, 10 days, 15 days, to see what is the movement in this account. Have other bills become NPA? Is there a cash flow, etc., etc. So yes, the answer can work, like sorry to use another professional, but it's like a lawyer situation. The answer can be a yes as well as no, but it is depending upon the facts and circumstances of the case. There cannot be one rule for all borrowers.
Actually,
yeah?
Thanks, sir. Thank you, sir.
And to that extent, it will answer your question of fungibility of fund-based versus non-fund-based, because I will have to move that limit to fund-based because it has devolved on a technical reason. Or am I trying to do evergreening? I'm trying to do evergreening, and I'm not consciously using the word evergreening. Yeah. So again, facts and circumstances of the case will decide, and the circumstances around what has been the history of the customer. Has he been paying all his interest? Has he been paying all his dues? If it's a one-off transaction, or the promoter, say it's not a Tata Group, but it's a regular company or an MSME, where let's take a situation, the COVID situation, right? There is a person who is running that entity. Because he has tested COVID positive, he is out of action for 25 days, 30 days. The business has suffered. And therefore, there is a possibility that he may have delayed. Now, these are circumstances. And one will have to be mindful. As an auditor, you will have to step into the shoes on the other side to see, is this genuine? And you will have to satisfy yourself, you will have to have all document. If he says, "Main corona positive tha, to bhai report do. Let me put your report." One can say, "I was hospitalized, so let me see your hospitalization paper." I may not want to see the hospitalization papers, but I may want to see the invoice which says you are in hospital from this date to this date. I mean, then you will have to use professional skepticism and do whatever it takes to satisfy yourself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. And let us go to the next question because we have less time. There is a question, Sanjeev ji, whether the branch has any red flagged account. If yes, whether any deviations were observed related to compliance of bank's policy relating to red flag account. That means every board will have a policy how the account is to be red flag first and which accounts are red flags. As far as the institute guidance on this is concerned, is the red flag account is the one where a suspicion of fraudulent activity is thrown up by the presence of one or more early warning signals. And all of us are aware that these early warning signals first have come up in the Master Direction on Fraud by RBI 2016 circular as an annexure, and there are 45 early warning signals. I tell the listeners that there is a book which I was a convener in that for the book published by Information Technology Committee on IT frauds and these early warning signals. And this book is available. Even the second edition is available now. So you can make use of it. Is downloadable free from ICAI website. But I will mention some of the early warning signals, and the book says that it should not be looked at independently, but in many of the early warning signals should come together to say it is a fraudulent activity. And some of the early warning signals out of 45 mentioned there, I would just say before Sanjeevji guides us on that, that heavy cash withdrawal in the account, not routing sales through bank account, frequent requests for general purpose loans, substantial related party transactions, increase in borrowing despite used cash and cash equivalent availability, increase in fixed asset without corresponding increase in turnover, substantial increase in unbilled revenue, resignation of key personnel, and frequent changes in management, just to mention a few. These are real serious issues with the borrowers, and there are many such mentioned in that particular guidance by RBI. So any take from Sanjeevji on this as a board level policy on red flag, since you are a board member of a largest bank in India. Yes, sir.
So, Srinivasji, I think the master circular actually listing out 42 or 45 indicators is the starting point. I believe that most of the banks have their own internal mechanism, and the parameters that have been actually listed out for red flagging would be far more than this statutory listed out or the RBI indicated. And the accounts are red flagged. And I think I will just go back to that internal control system, what we actually Himanshu mentioned, because I think most of the time this clarity is not there, that the first line of defense is the business unit, the second line of the defense is the risk element, and the third line of defense is the internal audit. Now, every board, every audit committee, every entity actually works around this system to ensure that looking into the past indicators, the kind of NPAs which are there in the system, I think most of the banks have worked around and come across with a very detailed parameters, which are far more in number than this 42, and which are captured for every account, which gives them a good indicator of the inherent weaknesses in the account and the challenges in the account. The learnings over a period of time in each bank, because of the forensic reports, because of the various frauds in the frauds in the NP and the forensic audits that have been carried out, have also been captured by various banks to ensure that the elements of red flag are really relevant and as exhaustive as much as possible. So as a branch auditor, if one is able to look at these aspects, it will help them in very quickly understanding that which accounts have apparently inherent weaknesses and what is the kind of corrective action that is taken. I think the way we have been conducting our audit, this becomes an additional tool in terms of actually focusing on the right areas or the concerned areas. And I would very strongly recommend that we should be looking at all these parameters and also seeing that how a corrective action is being taken in this.
Yeah, Himanshu sir.
So I think as far as red flag accounts is concerned, it is driven by the board policy. I would assume that this is a central activity and it will not be at the branch level. This is my guess, because if it start becoming applicable at a branch level, it may become very, very difficult for say a bank like State Bank of India to monitor all of this. So there will be a central activity. I think the branch auditors must inquire either from the statutory auditors or the management of the bank as to the applicability of the policy at a branch level or the central level. If applicable at the branch level, then I'm sure that the branch has a process to follow this, and to that extent verify the operating effectiveness of the process and the controls around that. But my guess is this will not be at a branch level.
Okay, okay.
And if the expectation is that there has to be a reporting that has to happen from the branch level, then there has to be a confirmation from the central level to say that this is applicable at the branch level, and what from a process perspective, what is the maker, checker, and all of that. So it is my belief that this will be a centralized process and it will not be at a branch level.
Okay, okay, sir. So without going into, you want to say Vipulji something? Otherwise, I'll go to the next question because I think it's well covered by both. Can I go to next question?
I think I have nothing yet to add in this.
Okay, okay, sir. There is one question on, sir, technology in audit. I was a group member of, I was in fact the convener of the group on new LFAR. 2016, we submitted our recommendations to RBI. I had been 4 times to RBI those times. But there were several issues there in RBI, and now it has seen the light of the day. Not necessarily the way we recommended. There are many new questions, some of them, but more or less, it is capturing all the risks to the bank, and it is well covered. It's a very comprehensive LFAR, and I think if we can understand the LFAR questions well and the expectation of the RBI, I think the expectation of the regulators from the auditors would be very clear. But here there is one question where one part of this LFAR is on the books of accounts. And we had always told RBI many times that from 2003, 2002-3, you are not change the questions which were saying physical printing of books and backups and whatnot at branch level. Now the question sets have been completely changed. And it is on technology in audit. If you really see that they are not expecting us to see printing, etc., they are expecting us to see some of the things which I'll mention. And I want all of you to react on that because these are important questions on books of accounts or books and records maintained by the branch. One question is on softwares not integrated in CBS at branch level. The softwares used by the branch not integrated in CBS. Second question is on exception reports generated. Now here I hope you are all writing up what is the question, because I'm asking 4 things together to save time. So if you have a pad, you can note down. One is about the softwares not integrated in CBS. Second is about exception report generated. Here I will tell you that branch is flatly saying no to exception reports, saying they are at zonal or regional level or head office level. We don't know what exception reports. Nowadays we don't print and sign, or we don't do anything about exception report. It's a general and we don't know what is exception report. And third question is on manual intervention. Whenever, where is the manual intervention in the CBS, whether it is properly, there is an audit trail of that, and whether auditor is satisfied that the manual intervention was necessary as well as manual intervention was in the interest of the bank. And fourth question is on data integrity for MIS. Now, poor branch auditor does not know what MIS bank is using, and therefore what data is used in such an MIS, and therefore what data integrity is supposed to see at the branch level. Just for quick thing, I'm telling you, software not integrated with CBS, exception reports generated in the system, manual intervention in the system of CBS, and data integrity for MIS are 4 very, very important. There are only these 4 questions in that particular chapter in LFAR. Extremely difficult, in my opinion, for auditors at branch level, proprietors and others to answer. I need guidance from all of you on this. This is extremely important, even from the bank audit point of view. Anyone can start. Vipulji, you want to start on this?
Yeah. See, first of all, the branch auditor will have to make inquiry. It's not that, by verification he can find out. So but typically when we start the branch audit, we send our requirement list to the branch manager. So in that, these points will have to be covered. I'll take first the exception report. Exception report, to my mind, is something which the branches have to generate every day, because exception reports are the one which throw the abnormal items or the error, etc. So we as a firm, as audit process, we ask for some exception report of certain dates, and I don't think so the branches can refuse to give exception report. They can generate those exception report and give it to you. And as a part of process, I think they are required to generate exception reports. So there, I don't know why the branches are saying that exception report are not generated. As far as software not integrated, again, is something which is very technical. So my thing would be that now there is it's a time that all the auditors need to have an IT expert in their team. Because unless you have IT expert in your team, I think these questions cannot be answered. So I would say that you need to take support of somebody who is, expert in IT. And this is one question which can be answered only by inquiry and by verification. Your the IT expert can verify. Manual intervention, yes, manual intervention is there. As I said, for example, the borrower's interest rate, the basic rate, MCLR is fed by the data center, but the spread is fed by, the branch incumbent. So there again, the risk control metrics which we are talking, by doing verification, you could find out. But again, manual intervention, which are the places where manual intervention is there, it's very difficult to find out. And data integrity, honestly, is something which I am not capable of answering. So if Sanjeev or...
Kaushik, sir?
Yeah.
See, my belief is that the entire circular on LFAR is a one comprehensive circular which is to be used by all banks, and it is not specific to a particular branch or otherwise. So there will be elements of that which can be only done centrally, and there will be large amount of elements that will be which will need to be done centrally, and a few of them will of course move to the branches. This is my personal view. Having said that, to your first question on use of technology, see, there is a difference between use of technology and understanding technology. Use of technology, if that is the objective, then every audit firm, depending upon their setup, will either have an IT expert, or they will have tools that they may use to cover probably all the data or sample data. That is use of technology. If one is talking about understanding technology, again, this will have to be a guide or a guidance that will have to come from the central statutory auditors as to their understanding of the systems of the organization and what is it that they would like the branch auditors to verify and report back. If the expectation is that every branch auditor is meant to understand the systems of that organization, think of an organization like State Bank of India, more than 10,000 branches, of which assuming 5,000 branches are under audit, 5,000 auditors asking the bank to tell them what is the technology that they are using, what is the architecture at all. See the chaos and the commotion. There will never be completion of the audit. Okay, so that understanding, if at all, is required to be given. A very high level understanding needs to get percolated by the central statutory auditors to branch auditors with a very specific and a clear direction. This is what we expect you to verify, and how. Is it by inquiry? Is it by performing walkthroughs? Is it by performing XYZ tests? Yeah, that will and that's how it will move very systematically. Coming to data integrity, I think again, what will happen is that this is a part of the system architecture, and I'm just wanting to give you one small example to drive home the point from a data integrity perspective. At the central level, there may be a policy that none of the computers used in the branch will have USB access. Okay, or none of the, or there is a antivirus policy of the organization. Now, on a test basis, one needs to verify, and this can be verified centrally again, or can be done at the branch to see if for the computers that are there in the branch, are there USB ports available? Can customer data be downloaded onto a USB pen drive? Yeah, and that data is stolen or is sold to someone. So that is from a data integrity. Is the antivirus updated in all the machines? It's possible that from the central level, they have pushed the latest patch, but for XYZ reasons that has not been updated. So the antivirus policy, is the latest antivirus version being used is appropriate? That's another example. A third example may be, someone because was not in the system or was absent from the system for 10 days, 7 days because of annual leave, his system may not have been blocked. Typically, again, there may be a policy that if a person is not logging in for say 10 continuous days, his systems will get blocked. Now, those are the things I would expect to be done at the branch level to check the operating effectiveness of the IT policies. But if one is trying to understand the entire architecture and the flow of the data, is going to be a chaotic situation. The last one that you mentioned about was, I think, data, use of technology.
Manual intervention.
Yeah, manual intervention is something I want to come. See, now, there can be situations where there are manual interventions at the branch level. Again, a classic example. There is an account that requires to have a minimum balance of say 5,000 rupees, and centrally at the end of the quarter, a program is run and a amount is debited. Say 500 rupees has been debited. Okay, the customer comes to the branch with a complaint to say, no, 500 rupees is too much, blah, 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 blah. Whatever, he gives you XYZ reasons, and the branch manager believes that he should waive off, say, 150 out of the 500. Now, there are two ways he can do it. One is pass the entry into the original system where the reference of that transaction goes along with the reversal of 150 rupees, and then it gets reversed as part of the end of the day process. That is one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is he may pass a direct entry into the customer account and crediting the customer account and debiting the income GL. Now, that is what I call a manual intervention. The branch cannot debit a income GL directly. It has to be routed through the system through which that charge was there. So yes, there are, if one has understood the systems and the architecture and the software that is being used, there will be certain codes that will be available, basis which a report can be generated to say that this is a manual entry. Yeah, say for example, it's a system level entry, the code will be ABCD. But if it's a manual entry, it can be PQR. So any entries with PQR, get the whole dump and inquire. This is the way to approach all the four ways. And this is my take on it. Over to you, Srinivasji.
Yeah, Sanjeevji, anything?
I think not much to add on what Vipul and Himanshu mentioned. I think, but these are very difficult to implement at the branch level. I mean, the broader concept of software not integrated or data integrity, because these are larger issues. And if we again look back at within the overall time frame that you have to get into these areas would be extremely difficult. So possibly maybe at the central statutory auditors level, this could be possibly, those large branches possibly they may have some kind of a thing. And I think this manual intervention which you mentioned, is it only in context of the NPA for the purpose of only the NPA provisioning, or is it actually from all perspectives?
No. It is regarding the books and records. and they are saying whether such a manual intervention is possible in CBS at all, because otherwise you are assuming that CBS is giving the right results and on which I can sign a balance sheet or I can sign any reports or any type of reports that are generated through CBS. So the question is where the manual intervention has been done, whether there is an audit trail and you have gone through the audit trail to find. Probably it's not very clear, but it is saying that whether it is in the interest of the bank and there is no fraudulent activity in manual intervention. For example, can I have a manual intervention of reducing the rate of interest at the time it is debited, say end of the month, and I reset the rate of interest on 1st of next month? For example, I'm saying, and this kind of manual intervention, whether CBS first of all allows. So they are asking the question where in CBS manual intervention has been done and whether you have checked audit trail on that. So that's very difficult and time consuming for a branch auditor, I think. But unless there is something from central auditor as to first of all, see, my take is that designing of a control is done at central level. So they should tell us where manual intervention is designed, in which control first, and after that, suppose tell me that in NPA, what the system is giving me NPA, because it should be system driven, manual intervention is first possible. They should tell me, and then I will look into it and whether branch has done, whether there is an audit trail. We always, I think in this guidance note, we should state, or we should state at least in LFAR part, saying that first let central auditor guide on all these items, where exception reports are generated at branch level, what he expects, where he expects the data, what is the MIS he is generating at central level, and then what data integrity he expects, and software which are not integrated. They would only know which is integrated and which is not integrated at design level. I don't think at branch level I can really know also. In fact, which software are additionally used which are not part of CBS, especially say Treasury can use its own software, for example, but which is again with central auditors. So at branch level, whether there is any I don't think any software can be integrated, which is not integrated software can be used in a system of a branch at all, as far as I know in CBS used by branches. But in any case, there are very specific
no, so I'll tell you where this question is coming from. There is a circular of August 19 on use of internal stroke office accounts.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So in a CBS integrated system, a manual intervention can come where, to prevent an account from becoming an NPA, a credit can be given to a customer account and a debit can be made to a suspense account. Okay, that is manual intervention.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that is possible. Yes.
Yeah. So, and there are various permutation combinations given in that circular. It's an August 19 circular on use of internal stroke office accounts. And this question is generated, or the genesis of this question is that circular.
Maybe then that is where I think all of us should read that in detail to find out the various ways the banks are can probably intervene in this whole system, and then
if the expectation from the branch auditor is to report on this, then the branch under that circular, every bank is supposed to get a internal stroke external audit done once in a year, and therefore the branch auditor will be in his right to ask for a copy of that report if he is expected to report on that, and rely on that report to give his comments. I'm giving a solution to the problem.
Yes, sir. I think we are about to close. The last question is on remote audit. Many of the branch auditors were last year really fumbling to do a remote audit. Many complained to institute that remote audit is getting impossible to be signed. Many of them actually qualified the report, where bank management said you can't qualify. There is a difference between EOM or CAM and qualification. So probably 701, 705, 706 need to be read again. And many qualified saying this is the qualification that I did it from remote. Then the bank management said you should have come to branch then and audited. Who stopped you from doing that? And there were a lot of arguments on these so-called qualifications, which the central auditors ignored. as a qualification from branch level, probably because this was something necessary. Sir, again, we are in the same situation that we may have to do remote audit. So quick take a 1 minute each on whether what challenges this remote audit we can face and how we handle that. Vipulji?
Remote audit for the bank branch is really a challenge because going by this LFR itself, there are so many things which you need to verify. The first item LFR, cash verification. Can you really do cash verification when you are doing remote? The answer is no. Second is, when it comes to advances, you have to verify audit documentation. So if you want to really verify audit documentation, you have to get scanned copy of all the documents which you have selected for your sample. So remote audit is possible, but I would say that you get all the details if the bank is capable of giving you all that you want. When they have that capacity of sending you through mail, then I think it's doable, and with the limitation of not verification of certain items. So that can come as the scope limitation in your statutory audit report. You can make a mention of that, not as an emphasis of matter, but I would say other matter rather than emphasis of matter. Give it as other matter, because we as the auditor had last year given other matter paragraph, and of course as central auditor we had given this as a key audit matter. As per the guidance note of the institute, the branch auditor is not required to give key audit matter. So going by that, this is my suggestion.
Sir, but last year, many of the central auditors asked branch auditor whether there is any CAM in the branch last year. There was a specific request by central auditors from branch auditor. They said that CAM is applicable only in listed companies, but banks are listed. So in any case, that was applicable at central level. But they were a little confused on what CAM can be
but
given.
Of course, the guidance note said CAM should be given, not given by the branch auditor. But my personal view, of course, is that the branch auditor also should give CAM, and the central auditor should give them the suggestion as to guidance as to how they should be giving CAM. But anyway, let us not debate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sanjeevji, on remote audit, challenges in remote audit.
I think we have to live with it. I think there are challenges, but we'll have to overcome that. There is no way of, avoiding that. I think whatever challenges Vipul mentioned in terms of, the cash verification or some of these elements, now you need to find a way of, maybe reduce number of visits. Maybe you will have a fine balance to be done between remote access and physical presence. But I think given the set of situation, and when the profession wants to do the work and the banks need to deliver on time, there is no one right way of doing things. There will have to be a fine balance between both the teams, be it the auditors or be it the banks, to try and cooperate and see whatever is required to give an assurance to the auditor is made available to them. I will leave it with that.
Yes, that is true. Remote audit, of course, many things in banking system, in foreign banks or in private banks, scanning is done in a systematic way. And scanning is, there is a maker checker on that. For example, if I get a document from a nationalized bank, I may not have all 100 pages scanned, or they may not be readable. This is not what happens in foreign banks and private banks. There is a system for scanning and approving the scanned documents as right document. This is not there. This is one of the challenges we have faced last year. Many auditors, that they did not know whether scanned is appropriate or they got in mail, something they should not have got on mail. The data of the customers in the remote audit, they got on mail, and so many things happened, that they were also not comfortable. Many of the accounts they could not check, like file, the whole file could not have been scanned. There is no methodology of scanning documents in the nationalized banks, and therefore there was a big issue of fight between them and the branch management as to how many documents you want us to scan, how many paper you want us to scan. But they were highly uncomfortable, especially senior auditors who were used to go in the branches and look at physical file, turn them on and look at several documents and get satisfied. So even if you ask for a credit report or a report or an internal note in credit appraisal, that will run into pages. Now, unless it is available on the system and you can read it, otherwise it's very difficult for every bank management to scan everything and send it to your remote location. So the audit, the percentage of work done was substantially less last time. in spite of them signing that everything is okay. This year, I hope that we learn from that experience and do it better. So with this, I think we have exceeded the time. There are some questions in chat, but I think one is on SWIFT, but that is very, very specific to foreign branches having foreign exchange transaction. I will not take it up here. Offline, for the JB Nagar Study Circle members, Himanshu Vasa and our Sanjeev Maheshwari are always available to them offline anytime they want to ask on any such questions on SWIFT or any other matters. Saying that there are questions in chat on interchangeability being avoided. I mean, acceptable in COVID situation. RBI has accepted that interchangeability, etc. So there are good things there also, which others can read. With this, I thank all of you to be here. It was, I think, a nice discussion from point of view of branch audit also. Even though I tried to take questions which are new, and something that is new that is coming up on us, our auditor. All other things, of course, you are listening in various seminars and conferences. Thank you very much. Thank you, the JB Nagar Study Circle, for inviting all of us, and thank you all the panelists to be here. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Over to the Seema madam.
Thank you all the panelists. CA Vipul Choksi, CA Himanshu Vasa, CA Sanjeev Maheshwari, and moderator CA Srinivas Joshi. Thank you, Srinivas ji, for structuring the today seminar on bank branch audit. Thank you for taking the issues relating to bank branch audit through panel discussion. Members are really benefited. With this, I request our Deputy Convener, CA Krishna Kumar Kodia Kedia ji, to present vote of thanks to all the panelists.
Thank you, Seema ji, for giving me this opportunity. All the panelists of today's discussion, CA Himanshu Vasa, President, Kotak Mahindra Bank, past WRC Chairman, CA Vipul Choksi ji, and past Central Council Member and Director of State Bank of India, our own CA Sanjeev Maheshwari ji. All the panelists had done the excellent job and given different perspective and practical aspect with regard to statutory bank branch audit, including IFC, LFAR, exceptional report, and technology. The moderator of the today's session, Srinivas Joshi ji, has also done the great job by giving the perspective from institute side and the conversation between ICAI and bank audit regulatory authorities. On behalf of JB Nagar CP Study Circle, I propose a hearty vote of thanks to the panelists, Sri Vasa, Sri Maheshwari, Sri Choksi, and also to the moderator, Sri Joshi, to spare their time on this Sunday morning from their busy schedule and enhancing the knowledge of our members. I propose a hearty vote of thanks to our more than 200 participants for this patient hearing. Thanks a lot.